Welcome to the Sleeping Barber Podcast.
Well, what's old is new again, and TV is certainly making a comeback. We get into a whole bunch of stuff around linear TV and the benefits of that, connected TV, the benefits of that, some myths around media buying, great Super Bowl ads from this past year. I think you're really going to enjoy this. Stick around.
Welcome to the Sleeping Barber Podcast, a place for business leaders to get the best and most credible information on marketing, strategy, and innovation. Your hosts, Mark Binkley and Vasilis Douros, share their experiences as they gather insights from the world's leading experts. Now, on with the show.
Welcome to the show. Today we've got Angela Voss, CEO of Marketing Architects, and Marketing Architects is a TV-specific agency. Did I get that right, Angela?
You got it right. Linear and CTV, yep.
Yeah, which is really exciting. Day after the Super Bowl, we're going to be talking about TV commercials, all kinds of things around that. And creative especially, I think, will be one part of it. So we're really excited to talk to you about this because it's such an interesting and dynamic area. It used to be that we had watched, I remember growing up on watching Saturday morning cartoons. The Cosby show was on Thursday nights. And everybody was glued to the TV at certain moments of time. Mm-hmm. And now it's kind of distributed, and there's lots of different places and lots of different ways you can watch TV, which makes the Super Bowl really interesting because it's still one of those things where I didn't see what the numbers were for the viewership last night, but a lot of people, something like a third of all Americans watch it. And there's 1 billion people, I think, globally that watch it. So it's a huge reach play. And so, yeah, in the context of that, live sporting events being an exceptional place to reach people all at once, it's just an interesting medium. So we're really glad to have you here to talk about the medium of TV and the creative and all those kinds of things related to that. So welcome.
Thank you. So happy to be here.
Yeah. So let's get this kicked off. As far as, with the rise of streaming and that kind of stuff, I'm just curious from your position, what do you think marketers can do to play in the space of being on TV, but not like TV, air quotes? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The pipes to get there are so much different than they used to be.
They are very different than they used to be. And yet, to a viewer, be it linear or CTV, there's still both screens on a wall, right? And yet these two channels have vastly different superpowers, I think. And often one, unfortunately, I feel is disregarded at the cost of another, which we feel really misses, the massive potential of how the power of them can work together. When you think about the linear CTV side, you spoke to it. It's the Super Bowl event, draws immense reach. You add Taylor Swift on top of it, it adds more reach. So that was a bit of a unique event, but this
supernova.
Yes, exactly. You've got these scheduled programming events offer that opportunity for mass market education and branding. And I think ultimately when done well, it's really a powerhouse for growth potential. And then streaming television, on the other hand, provides a lot of data-driven advertising opportunities. They're appealing for a lot of reasons. One of them, obviously, is just the likeness of the digital world. And most marketers, if not all, are coming when they're launching television out of digital. So there's just a lot of synergies there that make it an easy space to jump into. And I think marketers really need to be thinking of adopting a hybrid approach between the two that combines that mass appeal and brand building and fame building power of linear with kind of the precision and engagement of the streaming platforms. It's an exciting time.
That's really interesting. You touched on something there around scheduled TV. So I want to take you back a little bit. So we know that on-demand content is not going away. There's more and more platforms are coming out. So you're kind of forced into that. So how do you see the role of scheduled TV actually evolving right now? Because it feels like people are less in tune with on taking part on the schedule side, but they're all in on everything from a streaming from an on-demand perspective.
Yeah, I mean, I think, as viewers have more control over what they watch and when they watch it, reaching these Super Bowl or supernova type effects can be harder, but I think it's okay. And the reason I think it's okay is in marketing, we love to stress over evolution in our marketing ecosystem. But the reality is that even prior to streaming and content on demand, the scheduled TV space had already become insanely fragmented. I mean, to your point, we used to wake up and watch, Saturday morning cartoons. And I mean, think about how many cable channels you either have or have had in your viewing guide, just hundreds of cable networks. And so you have the big players, but there are just so many like long tail and small and medium sized media opportunities. So we've been dealing with fragmentation for a long time,
Yeah, it's funny. I was the remote controller. I remember sitting beside the TV and my dad would be like, hey, turn the channel. It'd be like turning the knob.
Yeah.
And there's 13 channels and then a U, whatever that was.
I know, the U. Yeah. That's so funny. I haven't thought about that in a long time. But I do think that the fragmentation presents a lot of opportunity for marketers. These large audience live events still demand a premium in pricing, and the fragmentation of the media landscape offers marketers a means to lower costs in attaining audience that they don't need to hit all at the same time. So that's an opportunity too.
In terms of the fragmentation that exists in the media landscape, specifically TV landscape, how do you suggest or recommend people think about buying media and TV specifically?
Yeah. I mean, I think, a lot of marketers might come into the TV space thinking they need to be on those big events in order to do TV right. And the reality is that that's not how we view as viewers and consumers. We don't only watch those large scheduled events. And so when you think about like your behavior related to your loyalty to radio, a lot of us are still loyal to stations, right? Versus in television where we chase content around and wherever it shows up is where we show up. And so there's a lot of opportunity with some of those like smaller to mid-size cable networks and the like, even on the streaming side, where you can capture really efficient reach. And I think the reality that we're dealing with is that fragmentation is an opportunity, but it does require some sophisticated tech in order to maximize it. If you're the buyer, we've just gotten to a place where the complexity and fragmentation has just gotten so vast that buyers really can't manage that anymore. And so having tech and automation in place, the use of AI, obviously with the growth of AI, is a large opportunity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and imagine that's such a good point. Like, it's not as simple as just putting all your eggs into one broadcast provider basket anymore. There's so many different places that you can access content, inventory, and an audience. Yeah,
absolutely.
The complexity of it is probably overwhelming when you layer, especially if you layer that into like other kinds of TV or media buys. When you mentioned radio, but there's digital and there's all kinds of things out there. Like, there's so much space to put in that.
Well, and I think even more than, everyone knows of cable, and they know of like their broadcast channels and the larger players in streaming and stuff. But even from a buyer perspective, if I want to reach the ESPN audience, I've got 10 to 15 different options to do it, because I've got local cable and I've got local feeds and I've got national cable, and there's a lot of cable operators to work through. So there's a lot of options, and picking that right option can really increase the ROI just due to the price alone. So that's where the complexity can be overwhelming, but it can also work to your advantage if you've got it right.
Yeah.
Listening to one of your previous podcasts, you had talked about that TV should be thought about a lot differently today. You talked about the fragmentation that we've always been dealing with, but I'd love to understand if there's something there that we need to double click into a little bit. So when we think about, traditional TV advertising, the contemporary landscape that we kind of operate in, what are the nuances that you believe we should be looking at this medium and the opportunity that it actually still poses?
Yeah, I think likely what I was referring to there is that the perception of TV, solely as a brand building channel is sort of antiquated thinking.
Right.
You know, we've got advancements in pretesting and AI and technology and measurement technology. And TV advertising should no longer be viewed through that traditional lens of merely just creating brand awareness or shaping brand identity, because TV can play a critical role across the entire marketing funnel. You know, serving not just to build brands, but also be a direct driver of sales. I would say both in the short term and also laying the groundwork, of course, for future demand. TV does a great job of that. And I mean, when you think about measurement, you know, has just undergone a huge transformation, just moving away from these broad metrics like the TRP and reach and frequency to more granular outcome-based metrics. You've got engagement rates and website visits and direct sales attributed to specific ads. And the shift allows for the direct correlation of TV advertising efforts with sales outcomes, which I think is what the marketing world really wanted, you know? So we're kind of there, and just thinking that companies should approach TV with that dual focus lens. We still need to leverage it. I mean, it's the king for brand building without question. But also, you know, exploiting its potential for targeted, measurable sales activation as well.
Yeah, actually, it's an interesting point. Like, everybody went digital, and then there was this belief and a perception that we could measure everything. And then it felt like, I think you referred to this a little bit before, but it felt like it was the death of TV, the death of everything, right? Like the death of traditional everything. And then now it seems like there's this death of digital kind of story emerging, and people are shifting back the other way, going, oh, how about that TV thing?
Yeah. Well, digital's not getting any easier than it was with privacy regulation. And, you know, I think we all love to measure. We love data. And so a lot of that early measurement that was happening was last click, you know, just we're getting data, but should we really be believing that that was the only driver of that sale or of that visit? And I think there's been growth in terms of our understanding of how multiple touches attribute to a sale and how to properly attribute marketing functions towards that sale. So I think there's a lot of things. There is the loss of the third-party cookie, and there's just, you know, marketers are being forced to look to other channels. And it's not getting any easier from that perspective. And then I think too, it's TV and radio top of funnel channels have been successful at doing what they've done for years for some of the largest brands in the world. And so that shift back, which is probably where it should be, right? A balance. Digital has value without question, but balance in both.
Yeah, for sure.
As businesses begin to navigate the dynamic landscape of, you know, TV advertising, the effective measurement becomes so pivotal. You know, you just talked about, you know, the fact that now a lot of advertisers are moving back into, you know, thinking about a lot of the channels more holistically, trying to find more of that balance, which again, I think I'm in agreement here with everyone, should have always been this way. Now, we want to make sure that we can explore a little bit some of the challenges, especially on the innovation side, in measuring the success of TV advertising. So it was Paul Dyson and Cantor who had published findings that aside from the size of a brand, creative is the single biggest factor for driving that profitability. Now, you've got a system to pre-test and measure creative impact. Can you take a moment, just talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. Yeah. So our creative testing platform is called ESP Now. That stands for Emotive Solutions Platform, and was built to give us and our clients a predictive result of what would be the best performing creative message in market. And so we use an online panel of folks specific to each brand. So be it B2B or a B2C audience, you know, we're honing in on that target audience that we'll eventually be targeting once we get in market. And we look to get a diagnostic read on a range of creative concepts before going into market, so that we ensure that we're not only putting the right message into market, but we're also avoiding wasting ad dollars on learning that a creative message maybe doesn't resonate with that core consumer. So it's it's a safe space to play. I mean, it's, you know, when we think about taking the big stage, you're like, well, gosh, I want to be bold, but also I'm on television. So there's that kind of emotional side of like, what are we going to put out there? And this allows you to really go, well, yeah, let's throw that bold idea out there and see if it moves the needle. And if it does, well, then we've got some confidence of why we should be going that direction.
We were looking up just before we jumped on the call with you, we were looking up how much it costs people to total investment into a Super Bowl ad. And it was something like I think it's $7 million is what I keep seeing it over and over again this morning for the 30-second spot.
Yeah, that's just for the placement.
Yeah, but then the creative somewhere between $15 to $50 million for the total thing. So like it could be an equivalent amount of money as a minimum to produce some of these spots. There's one with the Jennifer Aniston, like all the celebrities, like they got to be a fortune. So before you make a big bet like that, I'd imagine pretesting would be really helpful.
Yes, 100%. Yeah. So we do it through animatics. So that's kind of sort of like moving storyboards. So to your point, if we want to make a big bet on, 7 celebrities in one ad creative, let's make sure that that's going to work well before we go and invest all that time and effort and money.
With the pre-testing that you're doing, are you seeing a correlation between the pre-testing results and the actual impact that you're getting from the campaigns?
Yes, definitely. I mean, since day one of its inception, we've always looked to validate that predictive accuracy. I know we'll probably end up talking about this a little later in terms of our agency model and its differentiation from the traditional agency model. But one of the things that led to the creation of this platform and that makes us unique is that we as an agency invest in creative production for our clients. And so we have a deep interest in ensuring that what we produce will win in market. So yes, the platform was developed using 20 years of performance data that we have. And we essentially reverse engineered the question sets and diagnostic indicators that would allow us to get that predictive read using data from hundreds of messaging tests that we already had in market performance on. And so then on an ongoing basis, there is an extensive validation process to ensure that it's remaining, effective. We all like to say we're experts in our opinions, right? So unfortunately, in terms of our gut read, we're more often, I think, wrong than right when trying to predict what will win. So this just lets our consumers tell us.
Well, I love all of my ideas. I don't know about yours.
Yeah,
but...
I know. I know. I've never heard someone that was like, I've got a really great idea, but I really hate it. Yeah.
I have a really bad idea I'd love to share. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah. Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
I've been waiting for this next question, and I think you've had a chance to actually pretest some of the Super Bowl ads that aired, I guess, over the last week or so. Is there any interesting findings that you'd like to share?
Yeah, so we did. We found we went out with 3 different groups. So we did this before the Super Bowl. So of course, not every ad is released before the Super Bowl, but we did one in the alcohol category. So four brands in the alcohol category. So that was Coors Light and their Chill Train with LL Cool J, Bud Light's Easy Night Out. We did Michelob Ultra's Superior Beach with what's his name, Leo Messi, the soccer player.
Oh yeah.
And then go ahead.
Just real quick, we're in Canada, so we don't get to see all the same commercials.
Oh,
so we have to go look for them all. So
gotcha.
Full transparency, like I've seen most of the ones you talk about, but I may have not seen all of the ones you've talked about.
No worries. And then the last one was Budweiser's Old School Delivery, which was them bringing their Clydesdales back.
Right.
So it's interesting. We've got 3 out of 4 spots here leveraged to celebrity, speaking to the point we made earlier. The only one that doesn't is Budweiser. I guess maybe the Clydesdales are the celebrities in that one. I'm not sure. But and Budweiser and the Coors Light Chill Train came out on top in this case. So, and they were pretty much at parity. Both spots scored very high on sparking the interest of the consumer, likability, and I think if we had to call a loser in this category, it would probably have been the Bud Light's Easy Night Out.
That's the one with Peyton Manning and Post Malone.
Yes. Yeah. Yep.
So what does that mean exactly? Like the likability. So it's literally like the audience likes it or not. And
Yeah, I mean, there's a set of 12 to 13 attributes that, again, have been defined to be diagnostic of
Right.
in-market performance. So this is a little, it's not exactly how we would do pre-testing, because first of all, Michelob Ultra's audience and target consumer is very different than, say, Budweiser. You know,
Right.
of course, they're all beer drinkers, but you know, in this case too, though, you are in the Super Bowl and your audience is broad.
Yeah.
And so if you're going to leverage this opportunity to try to pull in new consumers, you know, then we need to be thinking that way.
Mhm.
So if this was truly like all target audience the same, and, you know, typically we're measuring one brand's spots against itself, right? There's multiple concepts for one single brand that we're just trying to determine what will work best in market. But from a broad audience perspective, this would tell us that those two would kind of rise to the top in terms of ability to drive sales.
Interesting. The
Yeah.
Clydesdale one is fascinating. Why do you think the Clydesdale, like I have theories because I know you guys look at all the science and all that kind of stuff as well, but like why the Clydesdale being such an effective ad?
Well, I think there's some nostalgicness there. I think that there is, it was pretty heartwarming. So I don't know if you remember the spot, but like the power goes out and the bars are trying to operate and they can't because they don't have power, and they're trying to get delivery of beer, and the Clydesdales kind of come to the rescue. So there's a little, like, you know, plot that happens there. I would say it was a bit more meaningful maybe than some of the others. Coors Light, the daughter walks in with her boyfriend and he's got the wrong color jersey on, and the whole family kind of is like, what's he doing here? And the LL Cool J Cool Train comes in, Chill Train, to save the day. So, you know, that's the part about marketing and creative testing, is we don't really know, like, you know, what is the reason. But we look at things like, is it informative? Is it easy to understand? Is it convincing? Is it likable, entertaining? Does it spark my interest? And generally that gives us a rate of what's going to perform best. So and then the second, sorry.
No, go. Finish your thought, please.
Oh, I was going to jump into the second category unless you want to stay on,
no, keep going.
On the beer.
Keep going.
Okay. So the second category we looked at was delivery, and there were two ads here. There was the Uber Eats, which we had mentioned before, with Jennifer Aniston and David Schwimmer and
Jessica
some
Aniston.
others.
Jessica.
Yeah.
Like the teaser
I don't know.
said.
Okay. And then there was Doordash, and their DoorDash's DoorDash all the ads, which I had to watch a couple of times to be like, what is this? What's happening here? But
I didn't see that one. I saw the other one.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we had a head-to-head duel, and the Uber Eats spot ended up on top here, which was one of my favorites. This one got a little drama heading into the Super Bowl. I don't know if you guys had caught that. I think I got the Ad Age email on Saturday morning that they were editing the spot because there were some allergy activist groups that were unhappy with one of the cuts. The original spot had a guy eating. So the whole basis of the spot is like, to remember that Uber Eats delivers so much, you have to forget something. Well, you know, they say you have to forget something in order to remember something. So there's like, this guy shows up to work without pants, and this guy forgets that he's got an interview. And apparently this guy who is allergic to peanuts ends up eating a whole jar of peanut butter. And of course he's like breaking out, and he's like, oh, actually peanuts are the primary ingredient. So they ended up pulling that part out right before the Super Bowl. So, which was one of the funniest parts, but I get it. So, and this was a close call, but like I said, Uber Eats edged out just barely with creativity and entertainability and likability, easy to understand, helped it kind of claim that top spot.
The Uber Eats one was really interesting because Mark and I were talking about it before we jumped on today, and it felt like the teaser itself with the actual ad, you have to almost do it in retrospect, because the idea of like forgetting something to remember something else didn't really come through in the original teaser, So I was expecting a totally different ad. Now, having watched the ad, it's like, okay, now that makes sense why David was calling, instead of calling her Jennifer Aniston, it was Jessica Aniston. And
yes.
so I think that's maybe where there could have been a miss personally, but it was still one of my favorite ads of the Super Bowl for sure.
It was pretty funny. Funny.
And
then the last,
sorry, it was just,
sorry guys.
No, it's all good. But it's just interesting that, like, because I have all these opinions. V and I were both talking about the Uber Eats one. I'm like, I felt like that was a miss too. But it's interesting because that's the point of your testing. Because you get in boardrooms and you go, oh, well, I don't like it, or my daughter didn't like it, so we should cut it,
right?
Or my niece, you know. And there's all these like funny, strange forces acting on a piece of creative and whether it makes it into reality or not. And it often 100%. Has nothing to do with how well it actually is received by the audience. It's just somebody's opinion about something.
Exactly. Yep. Experts in our own opinion, but not necessarily in other people's. So yeah, it's a tricky spot to be if you're kind of head of creative or head of marketing and you've got a lot of stakeholders and at the same time you're just trying to drive sales. Like that's the core, but the whole team and the agency's thoughts and the executive team's thoughts, depending on, you know, I'm sure these Super Bowl spots go all the way up to the executives in a lot of cases. Yeah. So yeah, it's a big bet.
And so for that, like when you're looking at making, maybe it's not recommendations, but or other recommendations that come out of your pre-testing that say like, this is a really good part. This part, maybe cut out that part. I've seen the System 1 videos, the pre-testing or the videos where they show like emotional reaction in real time.
Yep.
So is that the kind of thing where you're providing some kind of feedback on where you can make improvements or where you can pull back on certain areas?
So it's a little different. Yeah, it's a little different than System 1, not as much of a minute by minute.
Right.
And I think theirs is used more to try to optimize creative versus this is, you know, go broad. Yes, go broad. And then we can start to iterate on it, right? And if we want to test multiple variations, we could do something like that. But in terms of, you know, you're taking into consideration too the brand funnel, you know, do we have awareness, but we're having trouble driving preference? You know, some of those things kind of come into play as well. Ultimately, the core objective is if we, you know, have 4 to 5 ideas that we all really like, then let's make sure that the rest of the world really likes them, because that's ultimately what matters the most.
Yeah, that's so you can match like an objective with a creative concept and then see which of the concepts are actually delivering against the objective best.
Exactly. Yep.
Gotcha. Cool.
Yep. Love that. And then the last category we had was gambling. So we had Fanduel's Kick of Destiny 2.
Yeah.
You guys familiar with that one?
Yeah.
Okay. And then BetMGM, Tom has won enough.
Oh, yeah.
And in this case, we did have a pretty clear winner with the Tom Brady spots. You know, we saw really high scores in the areas of, again, entertaining, creative, makes you laugh, easy to understand. I don't know. I think maybe the FanDuel execution, this is a kind of going back to a point we made before, maybe a bit too niche for the Super Bowl, maybe.
Yeah. You know,
this is where we've got an opportunity to kind of create relevance and interest with a lot of people, and maybe people that aren't the FanDuel customers today were a little like inside baseball on that one. Maybe I don't know.
The one thing I did like about the FanDuel is it seemed that they had multiple activations throughout the Super Bowl, and so they were
telling a bit of a story.
Yeah, so I like that in comparison to some of the other ones, which was typically, I mean, they're more like 1984 Apple kind of versions where it's like just a one and done. So I thought that was smart from their perspective in terms of the media buying. I'm sure that's things you would advise people on, but yeah, the Tom Brady creative was really good.
Yeah, he was pretty funny, and Wayne Gretzky in that one, and he's like, "Hey, Wayne Gretzky." Yeah, that was a good one. Oh, Wayne. Yeah, so it's fun, you know, but ultimately, I think from a client's perspective, they get a lot out of the learning and the potential savings against creative that isn't going to work. But also there's just anecdotal insight that they get from consumers that helps spur new ideas and helps them go, oh, geez, if we're learning this here, we've got some of that messaging happening in digital, or we're using it in our direct mail, or we've got it in social or whatever. And so, learnings can transfer across too. So there's added value there.
I love the fact that, pretesting is becoming more and more part of, marketers' vernacular, and they are actively seeking out, especially probably more for their bigger brand moments that they're looking to launch. Because I think at the end of the day, what it does really well, it helps surface any blind spots that maybe exist in the ad itself. So I think it's something that we should all be leaning into as much as possible whenever we can. But you want to be as sure as possible on the effectiveness of a campaign, and this is one way of going about that. Absolutely. Yep.
When it comes to the creative, like you can buy media placements, and we talked about it not being super easy anymore, and so not to take away from that, but the creative component has been such a black box. Like there's my previous thought was that there was somebody that was anointed from they touched hand of God, and they were given some brilliant idea, and then some kind of divine inspiration, and they came up with this idea. And I don't know where these ideas came from, but it seems to me like it's becoming more scientific, if you want to call it that. Where there's an objective, the creative has a job to do, and it's less about this, person that comes out of a cave once every 10 years, and it's more intentional, and it is a craft as opposed to just some kind of inspiration. Is that where you see a lot of the creative moving towards?
I do. I mean, I think, I was sort of wished I was a creative. I'm just not. I think I like to think I am sometimes, but I'm really not. I'm sure I just drive my creative team bonkers. But it's a fun place to play, right? And you've got a team that's like, oh my God, I got this amazing idea. And I think a lot of what's happening lately is we're learning more about how to correlate creative strategies to actual sales. And with that, be it measurement and MMM, or it's pretesting, or whatever it might be, the System Ones of the world, the ESP Nows of the world are all trying to help us kind of figure that out. Our head of creative, Steve Babcock, has a saying that I just love, which is, your job is to not be right. Your job is to find right. And I just love that, because it is so... That's good. You're trying to take your talent, which unquestionably it's a talent and such a huge potential mover of performance and ROI. But your job is to harness the creative ability that you have against a set of people that are not you.
Yeah.
And so how do you do that using both science and art? That's their sweet spot.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a really good point.
I'm gonna steal that one, actually.
Yeah, I love that.
Well, at least I credited him, so I'm not.
Yeah. Oh, we're not going to credit anybody. We're just going to say it was mine.
That's fine. I did my job, so you do with it what you want.
I wanted to shift gears a little bit, and so now we've kind of talked about the evolution of TV. We've talked about creative being such an important part and how you can measure that in terms of what it means to be effective in terms for TV advertising. I wanted to dig into that because you guys have published a lot of great content around that. Maybe can you just talk a little bit about how especially now, what is the right way to buy TV? What is the right principles to really make the TV buy work for you?
Yeah, it's a tricky place to play. we like to say if it was easy, everyone would be there and everyone would be on television and doing it. But I think it really starts with the recognition that TV does drive full funnel impact. And there are so many ways to measure that impact, right? There's how to drive revenue. There's awareness, there's everything in between. And I think it's important to recognize the level of rigor that is essential in order to do that. We like to think about measurement in 3 buckets. So we have micro impacts, which would be the impacts that we can see almost immediately after a TV airing. This would be like, I mean, the Coinbase QR code Super Bowl spot that everyone remembers, right? The website goes down. Okay, it's that. Hopefully the website doesn't go down. But even when it's not the Super Bowl, we can see those effects. So that would be the micro bucket. We're talking about like the first 3 to 10 minutes, immediate web lift. Then we start looking at macro impacts, which would be impacts that we can detect kind of incrementally in the first couple months of a campaign. So you're starting to see like traffic composition shifts. You might be bringing in additional models like MMM to try to measure kind of lift beyond baseline, things like that. And then the business impacts would be the third bucket, which would be kind of 3+ months. These would be impacts like, how is TV shifting your customer LTV? How is TV impacting the profitability of other marketing channels like digital? How are we lifting awareness? How are we lifting consideration, preference? Is TV moving the needle in terms of pricing power, which can be a huge benefit of television? So, and then we just hold the belief that all measurement models are wrong, but some when used together are very, very useful. And so each one of our clients have a mix of models in place. I would say no less probably than 10 per client to really try to triangulate performance impacts. Everything from looking at incremental lift against a forecast. We can do heavy up pulsing strategies, control holdout geotesting, QR codes. We have accounts still that have 800 numbers, in the insurance space. So econometric modeling and MMM, and now there's ACR based attribution. So there's a lot of ways to measure. I think the hard part is when you're not an expert in the space, you sort of look to maybe 1 or 2 of those to kind of piece together what performance might be. And that generally will kind of lead you astray because they all have strengths and weaknesses. And so we kind of have to use a mix of them to really try to get at what we think that performance really looks like.
I really like that. So, and just make sure I captured it correct. You said micro impacts, macro impacts, and then business impacts are being like the 3 core areas that you should be looking into.
You got it.
And I think what I love about the most, it just kind of shows like how, I don't want to say how complicated it is, but how intricate the discipline actually is, to make sure that you can, at the end of the day, storytell internally, showcasing, the actual benefits of TV advertising, being very methodical about it. I absolutely love that.
Yeah. I mean, I think, a lot of times, unfortunately, we have new clients come to us. And a story we hear often is, we launched television, in terms of the reporting we were being shown, we were just killing it. Like KPIs were amazing. And yet we weren't seeing a lift in sales across the board. Like kind of just the gut check, like, is my business better? If if I'm driving this performance and I'm spending this amount, then in theory I should have incremental orders or sales coming in. And I think that's the challenge with measurement today is, there are certain methodologies that really give you insight to, networks or creatives that might be performing better than others, and yet they might not be the best view for kind of just total lift and what it's doing to the business. And that's where that complexity can be tricky.
One thing, just in terms of the complexity, one thing that comes up often is there's in the back of my head, there's a whole bunch of this Ehrenberg Bass stuff running. And so when I was working in broadcast media, like we talked a lot about the 3 frequency, and you should be buying based on a 3 frequency and digital GRP or GRPs. And then later we talked about digital GRPs, trying to figure that out. But then you have something like the Super Bowl and you go, that's a one-time investment for a massive reach. So is there something like the way that you buy media, the 3 frequency or old school rule of thumb like that, versus like the one time we're going to reach a lot of people with one piece of creative? Is there something that we need to learn between those different ends of the spectrum in terms of how to buy media?
It really, it's, I love the question because I think it's one of the, I don't want to call it a marketing myth because frequency unquestionably has value. We're very distracted people. Like just because an ad airs doesn't mean we even saw it, heard it, recognize, we watched the entire thing. And then, you know, someone goes, what brand was it? And you're like, oh, I don't really remember, you know, so, but what we should be thinking about, I guess, is this really starts with, as a brand, getting a viewpoint of what percent of my total market is in market at one given time. You know, if you think about, I'm just going to use 2 of the different examples. I'm going to use our own clients just for the sake of examples. So take a nuts.com, who is an e-commerce space that offers snacking and baking and nuts, of course, and some of the best snacks you'll ever get. Like if you haven't been there, you should be warned, though, that you'll have a nuts.com box on your front porch every week if you start. The second being Bosley Hair Restoration. So we don't have to be motivated, or we don't have to be convinced very hard to order snacks. We're sort of just in market all the time, right? Whether if you're looking for baking items or snacking items or whatever, versus we might think about doing something like a hair restoration for years and years and years before we actually decide to, you know, schedule a consultation. So, so when you think about like the need for branding versus the need for sales activation, that's where frequency starts to matter, because we need to be, if we're trying to be in the minds of consumers so that when we ultimately finally are like, okay, I'm going to go ahead and get that hair restoration, or I'm going to look into it, I want Bosley to come to mind immediately. Yeah. You know, I want to be in that initial consideration set. There's a data point. I can't remember who came up with it. It's probably a culmination of a couple, but that, you know, 80% of oh my gosh.
Oh, this is the Bain one, I think, where it's the of the brands that are considered in the initial consideration set in day one, something like 90% of those are chosen at the time of purchase. But
exactly,
if you're not on the day one consideration set, you've got like a 5% chance of even getting purchased.
Exactly. So thank you for completing that for me. It's too early for me this morning.
Yeah. No worries.
And so, you know, from a frequency standpoint, that does matter. But where it starts to fall apart is we have a lot of data on responsiveness. You know, we pixel all of our clients' websites, and we're using sophisticated modeling to understand what drives the sale, you know, and of course, everything, you know, there are multiple channels that contribute to a sale, but in terms of just what sent it there last, the most effective form of frequency for someone that's in market to purchase is 1. We don't need to be convinced very hard. And with every additional frequency, you are going to generate more sales, but you're going to be generating them at a lower ROI than you did on that first airing, or that first impression, I should say, to the consumer. And so just understanding those 2 components to it, that, you know, we all have a job that we need to do today. We've got sales goals that we need to hit. We need to answer to the executive team regarding what our marketing is doing. And then we're also trying to drive brand, of course. The beauty of television, I think, is that it's is so great at both. You know, I was touching on that a little earlier in terms of its ability to be that sales activation driver, but also use those impressions when bought efficiently, like get that reach so that you're doing both at the same time. And that's what can ultimately be transformative in terms of growth potential.
I just wanted to play that back for you there quickly, Angela. So you said for looking to do a frequency of 1 for those that are already in market is more than enough, than starting to increase the frequency where you would essentially just lower your ROI. Did I understand that correctly?
You totally got it. So that in terms of that first impression will drive the most conversions in terms of that set. Again, the second impression will drive more conversions, but you've captured a ton of them that first time, as long as they're kind of, And I think learnings like that can be really, really meaningful, right? Especially for performance marketers that are looking at the TV space going like, geez, it feels like a branding channel. So, do I have to do a frequency of 3? And if you've got those things in your head, kind of these age-old ways of thinking about television, that it's scary walking into that space because you don't know what you don't know at that point, and ultimately you can end up with a failed test and to go, well, I did all the right things. I mean, we even did the frequency of 3. Not sure if we needed that.
No, the reason why I love that, and I am the performance marketer here on the call, but it's one of the interesting things is, again, going back to the diversity of the channel, you want to make sure that you are prioritizing things like reach. So if you can get the maximum impact from the first impression, that in of itself basically can give you a larger audience that you're looking to speak to, instead of saying, okay, here's the target audience, let's make it a frequency of 3. That naturally narrows what your audience pool looks like. So I love that, and I love the idea behind it being, again, a high intent audience. Then you don't need to do that. I would assume, again, keep me honest here, Angela, is if you're going for a broad reach campaign, that you're not in like the category bar, so you're trying to build like the broader awareness, the frequency should be higher than 1.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you're ultimately after awareness and you're not trying to drive sales. I mean, we talk a lot about the bullseye target in terms of the consumer, which is the first thing the client's going to give you in terms of who's our target audience, right? But we talk also a lot about the influencers, the secondary and tertiary influencers that have a lot. I mean, if we think about how we buy, have a lot of pull and influence in our buying decisions. It's your partner, your spouse, could be your neighbor, who knows who it is, but really allows for an opportunity to really grow the brand and to break out of this place where, I'm trying to grow and I continue to hit the same consumers over and over again, no matter what channel it is. And I'm having a hard time kind of getting beyond that. That's where a channel like TV can be super effective. What you have to do, though, is you have to be concerned about price when you're extending to those groups, because naturally your response rate isn't going to likely be as high in your secondary or your tertiary rings as it is in your bullseye target.
Right.
But then, I mean, if we are really focused on trying to drive brand awareness and recall and things like that, then we do need to be giving some consideration to frequency as well.
The bullseye target thing is interesting too. I mean, we've talked a lot about V and I specifically, just debating between ourselves around segmentation and targeting. So there's a whole thing around that the assumption is that a demographic is a specific target you're trying to reach, as opposed to, let's say, an unmet need, which could be of any demographic or of any age, gender profile. So it's interesting because I think the way you would buy depends on the way you see the market and the way that you would create the segments in the market. Is that fair to say? Like if I'm doing 18 to 35 year olds, females, I got buy media that way. But if I'm trying to buy media, like the Apple iPod just popped in my head, 1,000 songs in your pocket, that's not an age demo.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think it depends on the channel that you're working in too, right? Linear versus CTV and the potential targetability that you have obviously matters. I think on the linear side, we're sort of forced to networks and day parts and content and things like that. And we can't kind of go I want these folks, but I don't want these folks. Where in CTV, I think the perception is that we can do that better. I would argue that there's a lot of third-party data out there, behavioral data sets that can be deceiving.
Mm-hmm.
We have the data, but they
Right.
might not be the most accurate. And so we have found that our CTV strategies are most effective when they actually start to look a little more like the linear targeting strategies.
No way.
And there's a lot more complexity to it in terms of our ability to target geo and use zip code
Sure.
and time of day, etc. But yeah, I mean, if you think about just content and who do we think might be watching this content, like that can be a good way to get in front of the right consumer.
Yeah, interesting.
It's really interesting.
Yeah. My brain's going like a million miles a minute.
I know.
Think about things. Wait a sec. Angela, in terms of just to shift gears one more time to the future of media buying, specifically with TV. I mean, there's so many different ways that we talked about a lot of things. Creative, we talked about the evolution getting up to this point. CTV is a thing. There's all kinds of targeting. Like, as far as where you see TV going, and like, what are some of the tips that you would suggest on how to think about TV buying, in the direction of, like, frequency of three being like an old school way of thinking about it? What are some of the best practices that you recommend for future of media buying, especially in TV?
Yeah, I mean, I think when you think about where this space is going, we're definitely witnessing a blurring of the lines, right, between TV and digital platforms.
Mm-hmm.
The future of TV, kind of like I had mentioned earlier, I think really lies in this hybrid model that leverages that broad reach and emotional impact of linear combined with the tech capabilities and targetability of the digital space. When we think about things like measurement, I think the future will be heavily influenced by advancements in data analytics and measurement tools, and some of this is already happening today. I mean, we didn't touch on it, but measurement technologies like automatic content recognition are just kind of changing the landscape in terms of a marketer's ability to understand what's happening. When we've got smart TV data when we got smart TVs that are connecting a view of an ad creative with our visit to a website through our Wi-Fi, an IP address. Like, those are things that are happening in the space that allow marketers to really kind of close the loop on what's happening after we see an ad. So, and then I think, the integration of AI and machine learning are going, who knows, right?
Yeah.
Where it goes. That feels like the wild, wild west, but I think it's going to further enhance predictive modeling and audience segmentation and optimization. And I think ultimately is going to make campaigns more effective and efficient. A space that I'm not sure about, I would say, is we're hearing a lot about kind of interactive shoppable ads. Right. I think as technology evolves, so does the potential for what a shoppable ad might look like.
Right.
And the tech capability is there without question. I think it remains to be seen if consumers want to shop in that manner. We've got very functional shopping devices in our pockets that we are very comfortable using. So will shoppable ads on television be a thing? I don't know. We'll see, I guess.
Well, taking into consideration the dynamic nature of our industry, then what advice would you give both marketers and advertisers alike? Because this is evolving so quickly, it feels like. So I'm just curious, like, what would you be advising to both clients, I guess, or marketers in this case?
Yeah, I think again, leaning into the blend of linear and CTV, I think is going to be big. And not leaning in a way that just assumes that one strategy in one area is going to mean success in another area. So really trying to understand the superpowers of those channels, I think is really important. I think data, getting your data in a place where you recognize it as the sort of the cornerstone of your ability to drive success, leveraging advanced analytics, looking at AI, using machine learning to gain deeper insights into your consumers and their preferences. I think that will even help us in the area of creative. If we think about creativity still remains at the heart of effective advertising. And so,
Totally.
In a crowded TV space, especially if you're going to move to television, like this is a place where we really do need to be bold. We want to stand out from the crowd, and this is where category kings are made. So we sort of need to behave that way and really look to kind of evoke emotion. And again, that kind of comes back to how do you do that in a way that feels safe and comfortable, looking to things like pretesting to help you learn on your way what's going to ultimately drive that success. And then I think just really adapting the test and learn mindset. The advertising landscape is constantly evolving, new platforms, new formats, new technologies. And so experimenting with new opportunities and closely monitoring performance, having that agility, allows brands to adapt quickly to changes in the market and to changes in consumer behavior. And ultimately, I think ensure that their strategies are effective and relevant, or a total failure. That's okay too. But then you've learned, right? Like what's going to work and what's not. So
one other thought that as you're saying that, especially the part about leaning into connected TV that just occurred to me, thinking about the Super Bowl, $7 million for a 30-second ad. Usually that's going to be a big company that's going to be able to afford that. But now there's also like an evolution where it's not, you can buy a YouTube ad and choose the placement of a TV screen. So is there an emerging opportunity for smaller brands as well to be able to leverage the power of TV in your mind?
Well, I think CTV alone, just that's the ability to get into television does come at a lower cost with a connected space than it does on the linear side, if you're trying to ensure that you can really kind of measure it effectively. And so, when you think about like local mom and pop shops, pizza places, etc., that I know I get hit with local ads all the time in my home through connected television. And those are just opportunities that if you were looking at the linear side, not that they weren't possible. Of course, you could buy locally, go to your local ABC or whatever, but the ability to zip target, you've just got a lot of opportunity for more regional players to make an impact with a top of funnel channel than what existed prior. So it's exciting.
Yeah, it's really cool.
Leveling the playing field.
Yeah, totally. Angela, how can people find out more about you and Marketing Architects and the work that you guys do?
Oh, well, you can go to marketingarchitects.com. You could find me on LinkedIn. I'm happy to chat with anyone there. We love hearing from fans or people that are interested in all-inclusive TV or just TV in itself. So happy to chat with anyone.
Awesome.
We're fans of the podcast as well. And shout out to Elena.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
She's phenomenal. And they're doing a great job with the podcast without question. Podcasting is so fun. I totally get why you guys do this.
Yeah, it's totally selfish for us. We just really love talking to people who are smarter than us. And it turns out there's a lot of them.
Yeah.
Oh, it's a great space to, I listen to so many podcasts. I often wonder, like, how was I learning before these existed?
Yeah.
Like lots of article reading and book reading, and some of that still exists. But yeah, it's definitely a better pastime than some of my prior pastimes that I just won't mention.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much for joining us. It was really great to chat with you.
Good to chat with you guys. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Ed.
Just before we get to the post-pod with V and I, I'm going to just ask to see if you could leave a review. We are always looking for ways to make this show better and really love your feedback.
It's time for the post-pod with your hosts, Marc and V. There it is. I don't know.
Yeah, it worked. I like it. It's
we
very,
could just cut it.
It's understated. It's really great. It's very you. It's very now.
It's very now in the moment. TV.
Yeah, you know what's funny? I kept thinking back to our conversation with Pierre while this was going on.
100%.
And yeah, there's so much we get caught up, or I do anyway, for sure, in a lot of the digital stuff. And then you're kind of sitting back here going, oh, yeah, like, I don't know, a seventh of the world just watched a whole bunch of commercials on a television set because it was a moment in time. And like,
totally.
Yeah, maybe there's something there to the TV thing.
Yeah, there's something there, of course.
I know it's understated, but it's, there's so much great stuff that's like, I get excited thinking about TV because of that opportunity we talked to her about the end, where you don't need to have a giant budget to make a pretty valuable impact. Yeah.
I completely agree. I think what for me really kind of stood out is I think we forget, and you would have remembered this, like if you were or are a traditional, cable or linear kind of user, there's a lot of channels that you're navigating, and naturally that does create fragmentation. And I think we look at today's state as being fragmented. The reality is it's always been fragmented. Nothing's changed. Yeah. Some behaviors have changed, but the fragmentation still exists, which I think was an interesting way of looking at the evolving space that is, TV. Mm-hmm. That I don't want to say nothing's changed. A lot has changed, but some of the issues or the problems that marketers face still exist. It's not that much different. They're just a little bit where people are consuming is different.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a good point, because when like that joke, or not a joke, but there was a real story about me being the remote control. Like back then, the reach wasn't nearly as big as what it was, as what it is today. Yeah. So on one hand, you're trading off, I don't know, like a mono audience with 13 channels, but not a very big audience, probably. Because also, I mean, that was back in the day when they had like Wild World of Sports.
That's right.
Like on Saturday afternoons, like there wasn't anything remotely like TSN,
No.
And so now you have all these specialty channels and specialty content, specialty programming, and you can target a lot of that kind of stuff. And the contextual targeting, I think, is really appealing. And the ability to like reach so many more people through these individual placements is kind of fascinating.
Man, I completely agree. Just think about all the contextual, and like, let's just look at our podcast, for instance, as well. Like there's so many podcasts out there. Mm-hmm. They're specialized in a specific area, a specific theme. That again, for advertisers, poses another, area of targeting, quote unquote targeting. Mm-hmm. We have more access to targeting capabilities than ever before. But again, I think where my point was going on the fragmentation side is like, as the space evolved, we just had, it became fragmented because everyone was trying to get in against those same audiences. And so it created naturally, companies would want to create more programming, right? Yeah. So more shows, and to take in a lot of this demand from an advertising perspective. Then we got to the point where like cable TV had over 300 channels that outside of the like maybe 10 that you would watch routinely, you didn't even know what else you had.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I, like when I was in media, broadcast media, like we sold out of stuff a lot.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think, I mean, that's a good, bad thing. I don't know that you ever sell out anymore, but there is so much more opportunity. And the part I loved about what Angela was saying with the pre-testing is that you've got this now. To me, what is especially exciting, it's not even so much of the pipes; it's the thing that you put into the pipe that really is
totally
what's going to drive the impact. Yeah. And so, having the ability to say, this is our objective, and before we make any big bet on a piece of creative, like, let's run some tests, see which of these ideas is going to better deliver on that.
Yeah.
I don't know that you ever completely eliminate the risk, but man, it sure is better than just rolling the dice.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. Like System 1, obviously the system that, you know, Marketing Architects has as well, like anything that you can do to kind of give yourself an edge, you do it. Like, especially if you think about the millions that are going into some of these large campaigns, you don't want it to be a wag. So you need to be with relative confidence that this is going to resonate with the audience you're going to go to.
Yeah. Yeah.
The other thing for me that really stood out, and maybe I belabored it a little bit too much, but I was honestly, I did not expect it. So the idea of frequency of one against a high intent audience, that fundamentally changes the way that I perceive not only the channel from an effectiveness perspective, because if we use, and I know you and I agree that the funnel in traditional sense doesn't exist, right? But humor me for a moment.
Yeah.
When you think about awareness, consideration, conversion, another area where, you know, TV that routinely doesn't play is in that consideration state, because usually it's like reserved for broad awareness, high awareness. That's where TV lives. But the moment you add a high intent audience against that medium and you make it a frequency of one, guess what? For me, that's a consideration state, because they already know who you are. They already know about your product and service. Now you're just playing that reminder. So as a performance marketer, my mind's like, okay, wait a second here. Always on. Let's think about maximizing that reach against that high intent audience with with the first impression kind of look, or the frequency of one.
Yeah.
I think changes the way that I perceive now how I can use that medium from a more performance lens to help drive, again, your total digital program.
No, it's a good call. I think the term performance is it's laden with a whole bunch of meaning that might not actually be real.
Yeah, that's fair.
You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
I think we've talked to Ty about this way back when, but performance branding, and I kind of that's where I'm leaning to with the reach optimization of one or frequency of one. Like there's performance behind that. But 100%. If you're looking at an exclusive like last click attribution model, you'll never see a view through.
No.
And you'll never consider a view through as being performance. And yet I've said this story a few times, but there's the old sales guy that I used to work with who was like, see all these leads? These are great leads. They've never visited our website.
Yeah.
And you know how I know they're great leads? They pick up the phone when I call them.
Yeah.
There's things that we're measuring performance against that are only performance because we can see it happening.
Totally.
On the channel that is in front of us, the computer screen in front of us.
I agree, man.
Yeah, like it's really interesting, because then you're also looking at, well, if you're only using a last click model or retargeting as your performance metric, right? Or your ROAS, you're missing out on a whole bunch of people that haven't visited your website and are in market. And so there's a whole component of like reach being a critical component of delivering ROAS.
Totally. Yeah.
It's crazy.
Right?
What a moment.
What a moment, man. That pause was for effect, everyone. Just trying to drive that point home.
Yeah. I also liked what Angela was saying with the micro, macro, and business impacts.
Yeah, love that.
Because it speaks about the time frames. And I think as far as performance goes, I think that's actually a really good way of considering performance.
Yeah.
In terms of like, there's the short term right away. Yeah, we can track that. There's the macro, what happens a couple months later. And then the business impacts that you're looking for, the incrementality and that kind of stuff, which might take 3, 5, 6, 9 months, whatever it might be.
Yeah.
Depending on the sales cycle, probably as well for a lot of those businesses, like that hair restoration she was talking about.
Yeah. Yeah. That or the snacking. I know I feel like I'm peckish all the time, so I don't need to be reminded that I could use a snack. But no, I think, again, it really kind of I'm a big fan of frameworks, but this one I think is a great one to kind of like think about, well, how are we going to measure this?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, there's the micro impacts in the moment, the macro, then the total business impact. And I think the way you can position that internally to the business is like, here's what we're measuring in the moment.
Mm-hmm.
Here's what we're measuring in the short term. Here's what
Mm-hmm.
how we're measuring total business impact, where we believe this campaign is going to provide, say, that halo effect for the next 6 months, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or whatever the case is for everyone. But I really do. I love that.
Yeah.
What else?
Yeah.
Is there anything else that stood out for you?
I'm just looking over my notes here. Yeah, well, the one thing that we talked about with the creative, and this is specific to the Super Bowl ones, but we talked a little bit about it with the Clydesdales.
Yeah.
Like, there's things that I think are really great about having a Tom Brady in your commercial, or I was trying to write them all down. Like that Uber Eats one, they had Victoria Beckham, David Beckham, David Schwimmer, Jessica Aniston.
Jessica Aniston.
I can't remember if there's other people, but you also get into this component where like, or this idea that like, well, if we get a celebrity, we can get more attention, and that might be the case. But if you think about watch brands,
Yeah,
like they all have a celebrity endorsement, and they all are like the exact. I mean, there's a guy wearing a watch, and they, I don't know if it's George Clooney or Hugh Jackman or whoever the thing. Like, I don't know what the watch is. I'm more aware that it's that character. And same thing with Uber or all these other ads. They can afford having big celebrities. But I sometimes feel like the celebrity angle might be more detrimental to the creative, because you lose, you favor the celebrity over the brand. And so I think there's lots of really cool opportunities just on the ability to be creative and not have the constraints of like, well, a big budget, meaning we have to go find a celebrity to endorse this.
I'm with you, but well, I think just out of their pre-testing, it showcased that So it was the Budweiser commercial, the Clydesdales, and what was the second one? I don't remember what the second beer one was, but both of them didn't feature a celebrity. And I guess she made the argument that maybe the Clydesdales are like the celebrity in say the Bud ad, but in not a traditional sense.
Yeah, but that's the part about like the distinctive brand assets to me, where it's like the Clydesdales are the celebrity, and you always think about Bud with the Clydesdales.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think you're 100% on. Like, you have to be very careful. If you're going down the celebrity route, you got to be very, very careful on how they help bring the product to life, and that their personal brand does not overpower your brand.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And I think that's where, like in your watch examples, like think about all the F1 drivers, like they all have watches as well. I couldn't tell you which one each one promotes.
Yeah. I know Verstappen's got one of them, but I don't know which one.
Lewis Hamilton has one. Like, I'm sure. Like, I just don't know. Right.
Yeah.
I just know they're expensive.
Well, and the recall part on that too. Yeah, totally. Like, I know George Clooney's got one too, but I don't know which one. And then as soon as I think of George Clooney, I think of the coffee machines. Yeah.
I know.
So then it's all of a sudden lost on me that he's even promoting a watch.
Oh, right. We're talking about watches.
Yeah. Anyway, there's like a lot of really good stuff about having no budget to do some of the things that we're talking about, because you're not as restricted to like a standard way of doing things.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, at the end of the day, what I loved is, towards the end where she kind of talked about, you need to make sure that you're leaning into the blend, right? I think at the end of the day, same thing that Pierre was telling us, like it's the power of the, essentially, the balance that you want to create, especially across all your media, genuinely having a multi-channel strategy that's omni-channel.
Yeah.
But I think like with TV, like I don't want to say feeling the pressure, but like be opportunistic, be bold.
Mm-hmm.
It can drive a lot of mental availability for you. Don't play it safe all the time. I think it's easy for marketers to kind of get into that that cadence of, hey, try, test it and true. This has worked in the past.
Yeah.
It's not broken. Don't try to fix it. But I think TV still warrants that opportunistic, entrepreneurial nature. And I think that sometimes it's lost a little bit amongst us.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. Yeah, it was a great conversation. I really enjoyed chatting with her.
No, it was great. Like you said, it reminded me a lot about like a lot of Pierre's conversation,
Mm-hmm.
you know, the resurgence of radio at the time. But here it's like rethinking even TV in a more traditional sense from a performance perspective. I think for me was a great conversation all in all.
Yeah. Okay, V. Well, what's coming up next?
Well, first of all, we're going to all go chase profitability.
Oh, right.
That's what we do.
Check.
Coming up next, I think we have a barber's brief, and then in between that, I think we have Herman. We have Herman back.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're right.
Right?
Yep. Well, we recorded them. I just can't remember the order of which we.
You put me on the spot there, man. I don't have the calendar in front of me.
Well, I just more meant that you were going to chase profitability. I was trying to cue you for that, but I like it. You're right. We do have Herman coming. And actually, we have another one. I don't. Yeah. We're recording tomorrow, and I'm really excited about that one as well.
Yes.
So there's a lot of good ones coming up. Yeah, there's a lot of good ones. By the way, not you, V, but you listener, we've been doing this a bit more, but yeah, if you have questions, you have topics, you have thoughts, you have ideas you want to share with us for us to reach out to people or topics to look into, let us know. Yeah, we'd really appreciate it. And likes or reviews are also really awesome because we
do appreciate them.
Yeah. Yeah. It's good for us. We just really want to get better.
But we're going to treat it like an NPS model. If you can't put a minimum at 4, then don't put anything at all.
NPS.
Reach out to us first, and then we'll talk about the rating.
Okay, buddy. We'll talk to you soon.
All right, buddy. Have a great day.
You too. Bye.